The internet is full of videos comparing sub $15 gaming mice to each other. And this is a great idea because if you have less than $15 to spend on a mouse, you want to know which one's the best one to buy, surely. But one of the things that's always kind of left out in videos like this is a comparison to something a bit more expensive, to show how much you're giving up buying, let's say, a $6 mouse in comparison to buying a $50 mouse. What is the difference between the two? And that's what I'm going to be doing today. So what I did is I went out and bought the second cheapest gaming mouse on Amazon US. The reason that I didn't buy the cheapest one is because the cheapest one on Amazon US costs the equivalent of like $100 on Amazon Japan, and I'm not going to spend $100 on like a $5 mouse. That would be madness. So that's why I ended up with the 1x1 gaming mouse. Now the 1x1 gaming mouse on paper has everything you could possibly want from a gaming mouse. It's got a laser sensor, which isn't the greatest, but it goes up to a DPI of about 2400, which is good enough. And it's got 6 buttons and it's got RGB light coming out of it. Now the mouse that I'm comparing it to is my daily driver mouse that I've been using for the last like 2 years. It's called the Corsair M65 Pro RGB. Now the Pro RGB is the M65 with like the better Pixar sensor that goes to like 10,000 dpi. So it's got an insane sensor in it. It's all metal bodied and it's got all kinds of weird RGB gimmicks. Now the first place that I'm going to be comparing these two mice is in build quality. Now obviously a $5 gaming mouse is going to be much worse built than a $60 gaming mouse, because if it wasn't, why would you buy the more expensive one? And it's really clear with the 1x1 the moment that you take it out of its packaging that it's not that well built. It's all plastic and flimsy feeling. It's the kind of thing that if you're the type of gamer that gets angry in Counter-Strike and starts like assaulting their peripherals, it's not going to last you more than a week. Whereas with the Corsair mouse, the moment that you take it out of its packaging, it feels really sturdy. It feels like the kind of thing you could survive a zombie apocalypse with. It's all metal, it's heavy, and it's really sturdy feeling in your hand. And to be fair, I hate to say this and use this comparison, but it kind of feels like an Apple product. Now it's really obvious that point 1 goes in favor of the Corsair mouse because, well, if it didn't, we should all be very worried. But maybe point 2 will shift the balance to the 1x... No, it's not going to, because point 2 is features. And again, a $60 or $50 mouse, depending on where you buy it, is going to be way better featured than a $6 gaming mouse is. And it is. Because with Corsair's kind of Link software, you can have like very intimate control of the RGB settings. You can set it to your heart rate or control it off a cell phone from North Korea, whereas with the actual 1x1 you can't control the lighting settings at all. It just kind of cycles through the colors of whatever. And then again with the Corsair mouse you've got a way better sensor in it, which means that you have much more control over the actual sensitivity of the mouse when you're using it, whereas with the 1x1 you've got like 3 settings, like really slow, not that slow, and then kind of too fast. So it's very difficult to find a comfortable DPI setting on the 1x1. Now moving to something where it gets a little bit more interesting, comfort. Now the thing is, these two mice are actually very similar. They're quite a similar shape and they feel fairly similar in the hand when you don't take into account that the one is metal and the other one is very plastic. I'm talking about the actual feel in your hand of the shape of the mouse. The 1x1 is actually fairly comfortable, and I have weird hands, so like I find it really difficult to find a comfortable mouse, and the 1x1 was comfortable for me. And it's also, they've got a similar button layout. They've each got 6 buttons, so it means that you can kind of have the same macro settings on your mouse if you wanted. So in actual kind of comfort wise, the 1x1 does really well compared to the much more expensive mouse. So in point number 3, things are becoming a bit more interesting. It's not that the Corsair mouse is clearly better than the 1x1. But the thing is, comfort is hugely subjective. So some people find the M65 very comfortable, other people hate it. So it just depends on what kind of hand you're using. And now let's move on to point number 4, which is usability. What are these mice like in day-to-day use? Now, the first thing that I did was fire up Premiere Pro to see what it was like editing videos with the 1x1. And I have to say, straight off the bat, I was disappointed. There's something about the way the sensor reacts to your movements that it just doesn't track accurately enough, which means that when you're trying to like line up things on your timeline, it just feels forced. You become really aware of your mouse in a way that you shouldn't. Whereas with a Corsair mouse, you're just editing videos. You never think about how your mouse is going to react to your movements. Now let's look at the most important thing for these mice to succeed at, which is gaming. I mean, they are gaming peripherals after all. Now before I keep talking about how they fared, I just want to say that I did use them at 4K, which is more difficult for a lower sensitivity mouse than kind of something like 1080p. Now the game I used first, which is my go-to game, which I spent a lot of time doing, is Battlefield 1. Now in Battlefield 1, the mice actually performed fairly similarly. With the 1x1, you could still pull off long distance headshots and you could keep up. It wasn't as though you felt like the mouse was affecting your gaming performance massively. Yes, it didn't feel as nice, it didn't track as smoothly, but you could still get away with it. But then I decided to move on to Counter-Strike. Now Counter-Strike, I have to say, is a game that I'm really bad at. I don't spend much time playing it at all because I'm just terrible. So I don't know how valid my opinion is on its performance in Counter-Strike. But the thing is, it made a big difference in Counter-Strike. With the Corsair M65, it was sensitive enough and it tracked your movements carefully enough that you could pull off high headshots over kind of longer distances when the moons aligned and you were super lucky and whatever. But with the actual 1x1 mouse, it didn't happen that clearly. It kind of felt like the mouse was holding you back. And after about 5 minutes of playing, I'd always get frustrated and move back to the Corsair mouse because I just felt that I had more of a competitive edge with it. Not that I was doing well at all, I was dying quite a lot. And now looking at Minecraft, which is a kind of game that a lot of people play, again, you're not doing a lot of jerk movements and you don't have to have super high sensitivity for a game like Minecraft. But one thing that I did notice, one big difference between the 1x1 and the Corsair mouse, is the fact that the 1x1 is impossible to find a comfortable sensitivity setting with just by toggling with the button on the mouse. I know you can go into the game menu and you can change that kind of thing, but with the Corsair mouse, you could use the buttons on the mouse very easily to find a comfortable sensitivity. You didn't even have to think about going into the menus. Whereas with 1x1, it's either really slow, very low sensitivity, or way too sensitive and you just end up falling off of your building project to your death. Now with all of that out the way, I think we can get into a conclusion. Now before I start with the conclusion, I just want to make it clear that it's really difficult to objectively test gaming peripherals because it's not like you can run a gaming benchmark on the mice and then, oh wow, this one obviously performs better than the other one. It's very subjective. It's up to how the mouse feels in your hand. But that being said, the Corsair mouse is obviously better than the 1x1. And it should be better because it costs pretty much 10 times as much as the 1x1 does. And if it wasn't better, we'd be really, really worried. But with that being said, again, the $6 mouse is actually not that bad. I thought it was going to be horrible. I thought it was going to be pretty much unusable compared to the Corsair mouse. But even when directly compared to it, it wasn't like it gave me chlamydia while using it. It wasn't that bad. Yes, it's badly built and the sensor doesn't track as nicely as the Corsair mouse does. And I think with a direct comparison, you can kind of tell that the mouse isn't performing the way it should. But I think if you didn't have the Corsair mouse for a reference, it wouldn't have been as clear. So let me know in the comments below what you think of this kind of test. Do you think that it's worth buying a $6 mouse? Or do you think you should save up over time and buy something more expensive? Now, I kind of think that's the better thing to do. I think that just going out and buying a $5 mouse isn't the best idea because the $5 mouse on the short term is okay, but I don't think it's going to last very well. Even after only 1 day of use, the plastic was already starting to discolor. Now, I do have very sweaty hands. I basically sweat cottage cheese from my hands, so I am really hard on gaming peripherals. But the Corsair mouse, after like 2 years, is as sturdy as day one. And that's definitely not going to be the case with the 1x1. So I think it's better to invest in a mouse than it is to kind of go out and buy the cheapest thing that you can find on Amazon. Yes, for a couple of weeks it's going to serve you not horribly, but I think after one too many rage quits while playing Counter-Strike, it's just going to disintegrate in your hand. Anyways, thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, do like and subscribe, and yes, I'll have more videos like this to come. Bye bye.